In a world filled with screens and distractions, we invite you to reconnect with the natural world around you. Welcome to Nature Bound, a podcast dedicated to unpacking the intrinsic bond between humans and nature. We'll uncover the benefits of spending time outdoors, including how a nature-centric lifestyle can improve your mental health, elevate your leadership skills, and unleash your creativity. And now here's your host, outdoor enthusiast, and renowned author of The 7 Principles of the Magic Rock, Emanuel Rose.
Welcome to the Nature Bound podcast. On today's episode, I am grateful and honored to have Ken Burton, the author of Hiking Humboldt. And this comprehensive guide is 55 hikes across the stunning landscapes of Humboldt County, California, showcasing coastal and inland trails. Ken's extensive knowledge of the region's hiking opportunity and combined with his passion for the outdoors makes him a perfect guest to discuss the beauty and challenges and opportunity for solitude in this unique area. So welcome to the show, Ken, and thank you so much for spending some time talking to me today.
Thank you, Emmanuel, for inviting me. And I do have to make one small correction here. The second edition of the book has 58 hikes in it.
All right. Well, that's good. Now I got to update. Yeah. Thanks. Well, I'm really interested to know how you first got introduced to being outside and being in nature.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a tricky one. I actually started out as a city kid. I was born in Manhattan, and we lived there until I was 6. And, so Central Park was the outdoors for me.
Yeah.
We had family up in Vermont, so we did some trips up there, but I don't think anybody really realized that, I was just naturally a nature boy. My as my mother told the story before she died, when I was 4, she took me to the American Museum of Natural History, and I just fell in love with dinosaurs,
Yeah.
as many kids nowadays do, but apparently I was slightly ahead of the curve there. And by the time we moved out here to California, 2 years later, I had become this, little mini whiz kid on dinosaurs. But
Awesome.
then we landed in a suburb of San Francisco, really a very rural environment. The house was surrounded by forest, and I realized that there were living dinosaurs all around me. So I got instantly hooked on reptiles and amphibians. And birds were sort of peripheral for a while. I know we're not talking about birds today, but
No, we can mention
if you
birds. It's
talk to me,
okay.
birds are going to come into the conversation pretty quickly.
Yep.
And anyway, I was mainly a herp guy most of the way through college. And then I did my 4th year of undergrad work in Kenya and shifted over to birds while I was there. So I've mostly been a bird nerd ever since then. But, just living in it, I think, was enough to kickstart me. I think I already had the natural inclination. If I can just share a small story, when I was in college, I met this guy who was really into astrology. And after he got to know me, he decided that I fit into this sort of elite group of people he knew that he called the SMNLFBs. And that stands for Scientifically Minded Nature Lovers from Birth. And
Nice.
apparently, we share a lot of really interesting coincidences in our astrological charts. I
Interesting.
don't necessarily buy into that stuff, but statistically, it really makes you wonder.
Well, yeah, if they have a title for it, right, there must be some kind of a pattern at least.
Something going on there. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's amazing. So now, did you go to school at HSU?
I didn't, first I grew up in Marin County.
Uh-huh.
And for those who aren't familiar with California geography, that's just north of San Francisco. And for some reason, Humboldt was just off my radar when I was college shopping. And I looked at UC Davis, I looked at Stanford, and I wound up at UC Santa Cruz,
Oh yeah,
largely because of the beauty of the campus,
sure.
I think, but also because a fellow student a couple of years ahead of me, whom I really admired, went there.
Yeah,
And that was, I think, a big part of it.
sure. Yeah. No, I think.
Yeah, and he actually wound up being one of NPR's science reporters.
Oh, okay. Nice. Well, what triggered you to get into deep into hiking Humboldt?
Hmm. Well, I've been a hiker for as long as I can remember, and when I moved here in 2005, there wasn't a guide to hiking that covered the entire county. It was really coastal redwood forest focused. That and it still is largely, with the exception of my book.
Right.
And it just I kind of longed for something that sort of pointed me in the right direction in the more inland areas. Uh, and so I need to give a little bit of preamble here. This whole book writing thing actually sort of got started with a couple of other books about birds. I am a docent at the Arcata Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary, and many times when I was the person staffing the interpretive center there, we'd have visitors coming in asking, so I saw this bird, and they tried to describe it. And I don't know if some people may resonate with this, but non-birders' descriptions of birds are can be pretty laughable,
For
and it's
sure.
really challenging to figure out what the heck they're talking about. And so I got to thinking, okay, we need a binder here in the interpretive center with information and good pictures about the birds that people are likely to be asking about.
Yeah.
And so I worked with a fellow board member of the Friends of the Arcata Marsh to put that product together. We picked 50 birds. I recruited a local author, David Fix. You might have heard of him. He's recently passed away, to write the text. And we put this thing together, and it wound up looking so nice that we decided it deserved more than a 3-ring binder. And
Nice.
so it wound up being converted to a spiral bound book that is now in its 2nd edition and still available for purchase at the Interpretive Center. And Northtown Books, I think, has it as well. And then we started thinking, well, wouldn't it be cool to have something like this at other places in the area, like the Humboldt Bay National Wildlife Refuge, maybe the state parks, sort of specific to those areas. But in the process of trying to shop that idea around, the feedback that I kept getting was, no, that doesn't make sense. There's going to be so much overlap. Why don't you just make one big book that covers the whole region?
Sure.
And so we went ahead with that idea, and that became this book called Common Birds of Northwest California, that I'm now working on the 4th edition of that one. And so I kind of just got into this book writing mode. And once I had that one out of the way, then I thought, okay, it's time for a good hiking guide to Humboldt County. And so I just sat down and thought about the hikes that made sense. I spent hours and hours looking at maps of areas that I wasn't already familiar with. And 3 years later, Hiking Humboldt Volume 1 came out. And I should probably talk about the publishing process a little bit if you want to go there.
Yeah, sure.
That's
Let's.
kind
I
of an
mean,
interesting.
the book is really interesting in that you have a lot of detail about the type of the hike, what you're going to see, how long it is. So, I mean, each of these 58 hikes, you have a lot of information in advance of going and attempting it.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting that you say that, a lot of detail, because if you compare my book against many other hiking guides, I think my approach is pretty minimalist. I mean, there are some books out there that will like tell you almost step by step what you're seeing.
Right.
And you might as well, I don't know, I appreciate some of that information, but on the other side, you almost don't need to go. You've got so much information
All right.
that I feel like I've already been there just by reading the description. So I tried to take a really minimalist approach to that book, give a basic idea of what kind of environment you'd find yourself in and what the overall experience was going to be like. But,
Yep.
I didn't want to slant it towards any particular user group. My original fantasy, and I think it's going to remain a fantasy forever, was that I'd recruit specialists to hike the trails after the book came out and write sort of focused, more step-by-step stuff that would
Right.
be on a website that would go with the hike. So if people wanted to know about the geology of a certain hike, they could go there, or the mushrooms or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's never going to happen. But yeah, so I hope that that the book came out at least somewhat how I intended it.
Well, now, have you been on all 58 of these hikes?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
This is all I've walked or driven or bike ridden every inch of those 58 hikes. Yeah.
And then, do you have a hiking companion that goes with you, or are you on your own with your own Ken thoughts?
Yeah, oh God. That's too often the latter, but it varies. I mean, I've done a lot of them on my own, and I've done a fair number with other people, some more than others. So, and the main ones are acknowledged in the book.
Yeah, I love it. And then, are there any particular favorites that you have out of this 58 that you've included?
I get asked that a lot, and not just about hikes, but about a lot of other things. And I've realized I don't do favorites very well. I just don't really operate that way.
Yeah,
And I don't know what that's about, but I definitely have some that I don't ever need to do again, and I'm not going to say which ones those are. But,
yeah, there you go. I like that.
Yeah, I'd have to say that my favorites are probably the ones that some of the ones I don't get to very often.
Sure.
They're too far away. I really did not know the King Range at all before I started this project, and maybe this is a good time to say that one of the reasons that I wanted to do this book was to give myself some real incentive to get outside my little comfort zone and get into some parts of the county that I didn't know. And
Is that King Range? Is that in the South, Humboldt?
yeah, it's coastal southern Humboldt. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the Lost Coast,
Yeah,
basically.
gotcha.
And I just fell in love with that place. It's so remote, and once you get off the Lost Coast Trail itself, there's so few people out there using the landscape.
Yeah,
You really just feel like you're at the edge of the world there.
yeah.
And it's easy to see why Caltrans never figured out how to put Highway 1 through there.
Yeah, it's rugged is the understatement of all that landscape down there.
Yeah, but Six Rivers National Forest has some truly spectacular areas. I wish that it had more of a budget for trail maintenance, and and unfortunately, all the wildfires that we've had in the last 20 years, 25 years have just obliterated so much of that landscape, and
Yep,
it's just hell to try to keep a trail in place once an area has burned.
for sure. I'm curious about like, is there a hike in the book that's like coastal to oaks? What's the most diverse hike in terms of varied landscape in the book?
That is a question I have not been asked before. The one that comes instantly to mind is the Lost Man Creek Trail, which is really a road. It's not a road that's drivable by the public, but it is drivable by park, park service vehicles
Yep,
or timber company vehicles. And it's bicycleable. It is definitely a designated mountain bike trail, but it starts at I don't know, like 12 or 1300 feet on Bald Hills Road,
Yeah.
if you do it in the recommended direction. And it can be, it's mixed evergreen forest up there, Douglas fir, tan oak primarily, and it can be really hot up there in the summertime. And it winds up in redwood forest close to sea level, and in a just completely different environment. So that's the one that comes to mind as maybe the most jarringly different from one end to the other. I kind of focused on loops.
Uh-huh.
So you wind up right back where you started on
Yeah.
most of them. Those are, just logistically so much easier. Um, but let me think some others. Some of the ones down in Humboldt Redwoods State Park, they include some, nice valley bottom redwood forest, and then you go through prairies and up into ridge top Douglas fir dominated forest. So nice variety on those, and some of the King Range hikes too go through a lot of different stuff with stretches right along the beach.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the magic points of Humboldt County in particular is just the variety of species and the different ecosystems that you can get through in a relatively short distance.
Yeah, yeah, and Humboldt County. I mean, it's far from being even the biggest county in California, and yet it's got so much diversity to it. Maybe not on the scale that something like Kern County does, which
Mhm.
is just absolutely enormous and goes all the way from the inner coast ranges across the San Joaquin Valley to the Sierra Nevada,
Yeah.
and then into the Mojave Desert. That's all in one county. We don't
Yeah.
have quite that level of diversity, but sometimes when I find myself in some remote corner of Humboldt County and I think about like the other end of the county, it's like,
Yeah.
wow, this is all Humboldt County. What incredible diversity. And there's nobody here and there's nobody there. And
Right.
um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Um, well, what's some of the feedback that you've gotten from readers in terms of what they've liked and found useful about the book?
oh, I've been just really I don't know, gratified, heartened. I'm not sure what the right word is. Very humbled and pleased at the reception that it's gotten. I mean, it's liked well enough and sold well enough that I was asked by the publisher to do a second edition, which came out last year.
Yeah.
Um, but I actually saw the word beloved attached to it once.
No.
That
Yeah.
was wonderful.
Yeah.
And people, I run into people actually out on the trails using it. People come up to me and ask for my autograph. It's like,
Ah, I love it.
whoa.
Yeah.
So um, in in some ways, I feel like it's really kind of, I don't know, coupled with the other book, I think it's sort of kind of given me, I don't know, I feel like a medium-sized fish in a small pond here.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
And yeah, it's been great. There are quite a few local hiking groups, and they refer to it pretty often for ideas for their outings, and even the local chapter of the Native Plant Society, the president of that uses the book to come up with ideas where to take people for botanizing.
Wow. I love it.
So yeah, it's great. And I should make sure to mention volume 2 of Hiking Humboldt and the kids volume 2. And there's an interesting story there if we have time
Yeah, absolutely.
for it. So uh, I um, I found the publisher that published the book. It's Backcountry Press. It's a local publisher. They're based in Neeland. It's a husband-wife team. Um, Michael Kaufman and Allison Paklemba. Those are both very well-known names around here in the natural history and education communities. Michael had shortly before I started working on the book, had published his first book called Conifer Country. And he had some hikes in that book. And I thought, okay, here's a guy, a local guy that I know, who is interested in publishing books about hiking. Why don't I take this idea to him, see if he's interested? Well, he was instantly interested. And we started working on the book together. And at some point in the process, before the book came out, the Times Standard, which is our local daily newspaper, ran a story that was mainly about backcountry press, not about the book. But since the book was the project of the moment, it was mentioned that, backcountry press was working on this hiking guide to Humboldt County. Well, this other guy, Reese Hughes, read that article, also knew Michael and me, and he was also thinking about writing a hiking guide to Humboldt County. And so he contacted Michael and said, okay, how can I fit into this project?
Yeah.
And the three of us got together and brainstormed a bit to figure out what we could do, how we could do this without having Reese and me stepping on each other's toes.
Sure. Yeah.
And the result of that was volume 2, which Reese wrote, and it focuses on shorter hikes, more, maybe family-friendly things, just shorter, easier to get to, and also a lot of walks on roads. And I mean, we're not talking about Highway 101 here, but maybe, Bear River Ridge Road, Bald Hills Road, those kinds of places. And so mine came out a little before his, and he's working on a revision of his right now. But so they're complementary books, and they cross-reference each other. Where we have overlap, it's mentioned in both directions.
Nice.
And then more recently, Reese also put one out, hiking Humboldt for kids. Basically, the book is written for their parents, but it's where to go hiking with little kids.
Love it.
And that's apparently been doing really, really well too.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that you're helping people get outside and experiencing the wildness of Humboldt County and getting off their phones and into the real world. And so I applaud that effort, and thank you very much for your contribution.
Well, yeah, and here I am on my phone where I would be out birding this morning if we were doing this.
Well, I appreciate your sacrifice, and if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get in touch with you and find out about birding or about hiking Humboldt?
Probably email would be my preferred mode of contact. And I have, actually, I'm just going to direct people to my website, and my email address is there, because I do some, at the risk of shameless self-promotion here.
Please, be shameless.
I do guided tours, mostly focused on birds, but happy to do sort of general ecology tours. And I do work as a guide in the Redwood National and State Parks for a company called Redwood Adventures, but I also do freelance stuff. So the website is norcalnature.com.
All right.
And so that's easy enough to find, and my contact information is there, and I'd be happy to respond to any queries.
All right. Well, that's great. Yeah, we'll have your contact information in the show notes and make it easy for people to get in touch with you. And again, I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for sharing those stories, Ken.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. You have a great day. Get outside.
Yep. I'm going right now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Nature Bound. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. If you found value in today's episode, please share with someone who needs to hear it. Be sure to purchase your copy of The 7 Principles of the Magic Rock at EmanuelRose.com or on Amazon. We thank you again for joining us today, And remember to get nature bound.